So I recently read this article on TypeScript, and I've also seen some LinkedIn comments about this as well. So I thought that it would be an interesting topic to discuss. So first and foremost, when developers talk about TypeScript, many of them have strong opinions about it. So one camp would be totally against it, another camp likes it. If we read this article, the first sentence is that everyone loves TypeScript. I don't think this is true. I think that many developers actually dislike TypeScript. They prefer not using it. I think that one of the primary reasons to why many developers don't like TypeScript is that they're simply not comfortable with it, or they haven't invested enough time in learning it efficiently. So I would like to address some of the arguments in this article and see and analyze them basically, and think about. The first argument is that it's risky to use TypeScript. So what they're saying is that TypeScript only checks types at compile time and only types that are available. I'm not sure about what they mean with available. If a type isn't available, then something is wrong with your code, I suppose. And usually in a TypeScript project, you usually work with data that that you know, and if you don't, then you usually you add checks to see what a type is. But I don't agree that TypeScript only checking types at compile time, that's a weakness. I don't agree with that. I think that TypeScript actually is a compile time type checker. That's the purpose of it. And the author says that in TypeScript you rely on the compiler to do it for you, but you can only check so much. TypeScript, it does compile time type checking, and that's what it's supposed to do. And if you need to add type checking during runtime, then you have to do something additional to this. So basically, you have to do more than just using TypeScript. But it doesn't mean that TypeScript is useless, because that's kind of the idea that I'm getting from this article. The author is saying that if you will spend time writing definitions and then spend time writing code to ensure these definitions are maintained during runtime, why have them in the first place? You're supposed to write definitions for the data that you're working with in an application, so that the typing is consistent across the application and that you don't do any mistakes, typing related mistakes. It's kind of like unit testing, when some people, they think that unit testing is a waste of time because you still have to write code. And why should you then write code to test the code that you just wrote? But I think that these people are missing the whole point of unit testing, and I think that this author is also missing the point with TypeScript, to be honest. The second argument is that TypeScript is supposed to be messy. I mean, this is not a paradox. I think it depends on which programming background you come from. So I think that many developers that have worked with statically typed languages like Java and C Sharp, they would say that TypeScript is a very clean language. I don't think that it's verbose in that sense. And also one of the examples that he's using here is I would say not a fair example, because what this code author is basically doing is the code author is trying to make sure that the type is compatible. So sometimes when you use third-party libraries, if the type isn't compatible for some reason, the VS Code is suggesting that you cast it as unknown, and then you cast it to the type that you want. So you can basically tell the compiler that this value is no longer what it seems to be. You just basically define your own type this way. And this is something that you shouldn't do in most scenarios. If you find yourself writing this code that you have to type things twice, then something is probably wrong somewhere else. So this is more often a quick hack to just keep on going with the development, but this isn't the way production code would look like normally. So I don't think it's a good example to show. I think that generally TypeScript is a very clean language. I don't think it's bad at all. And I think that some of these things that they're writing here, so I don't think you always have to write code like this. I think that, for instance, this is a callback. So you could basically write a type, add a type which holds this type, and then you can use the type here. So you can say subscribe callback, and you don't have to explicitly define things here. I mean, you could, in TypeScript, nothing is preventing you from defining a very complex interface right in the parameter, but that's not how you usually should write TypeScript. You should try to think of your types and interfaces and maybe even extract them to a separate module and basically write code as a software developer usually does, thinking about modularity and clarity in code. So I don't think this is a good example, even though it's from the actual source code of Redux. I don't think this represents how TypeScript usually is written. So the next argument is that it does not solve the problem. TypeScript is said to solve JavaScript's problems, but it does not. I don't think that TypeScript is meant to solve issues with the language itself. I don't think that was never the case. And the interesting thing is that the author is mentioning examples like semicolons. Semicolons being optional or not, that's usually something that you don't have to discuss about in a serious project, because most of the times you're using a linter and you define rules for semicolons. So if the developers of a project agree that they will use semicolons, then they will basically add it as a linting rule, and the linter will make sure that this code is consistent. So that's not a problem with the language itself. And also syntactic sugar in place of OOP, that's also a thing that it's not a problem. You can still write object-oriented programming in JavaScript and make it work just like any object-oriented language would work. The mechanisms behind the hood are not always important, as long as you can make sure that you develop software in an object-oriented manner, if that's the paradigm you've chosen. So I don't think that these problems are meant to be solved by TypeScript. I think that TypeScript is solving an issue which was missing in JavaScript, which is basically the ability to add types and to define types and to add interfaces in that sense. TypeScript is actually solving many problems, and I think that's the reason why I would say a big part of the industry today is adopting TypeScript. If you look at most of the open source libraries, they are using it. If you look at enterprise companies, usually they are adopting TypeScript. So it does solve problems, maybe not the problems that the author is mentioning, but it was never meant to solve those problems. And you can also question if they are actual problems. I think as software developers, we should focus on problems that are actually relevant, like being able to type a system and to be able to work with defined types. That is certainly a common need in software development. Another argument that the author is mentioning is that TypeScript is not a superset, it's a subset. TypeScript is limiting what you can do with JavaScript, and I don't think that TypeScript in any sense is limiting JavaScript. By definition, it's not doing that. And the other arguments are about TypeScript being open source, and that I don't think that corporations, by their nature, that if they control software, that software is not good. Software is usually controlled by someone, and if that someone happens to be a corporation or not, I don't think that matters too much to me personally. So that's a highly subjective argument. It's not really. I don't think it's a strong argument to not use TypeScript. As a summary, I would say that TypeScript is valid and it is useful, and I think that the industry will just keep on adopting it. And I think that as software developers, we should try to embrace software that is widely used, and we shouldn't run away from it or try to justify not using it, because even if you don't like it and if you don't want to work with TypeScript, a big part of the industry will. So it's up to you to choose if you want to use a technology or not. But I think that we shouldn't focus too much on technologies and if they are good or not. I don't think we should debate these things. To be honest, I think that we should focus on learning and sharing knowledge about how to develop software in a maintainable way and not bother too much talking about TypeScript. Thanks. This was all from me for this time, and I'll see you in the next video.